Yet again, this is not what I expected. Hi and welcome to my channel, I'm Øystein and I'm trying to become a bookworm. And in this video we're going to talk about An Ode to Darkness by Sigri Sandberg. This book was recommended to me and I thought this would be the perfect book to read in Easter, just because I'm at the cabin, where the darkness is all around. I don't know if this is relatable, but each time I come to the cabin I'm surrounded by darkness and it amazes me every time, so each time I go home I miss the darkness and what it brings. And that's pretty much why I wanted to read this book. This is a non-fiction and it's about the author herself and her trying to conquer her fear of the dark. So she travels to her cabin in the Norwegian mountains and tries to stay there as long as she can to befriend the darkness and get along with it. The book is quite small and it's split into the days she stays at the cabin, so that's the main theme. Alongside her own story, she tells us about this Austrian woman called Christiane Ritter. She moved to Svalbard in the 1930s alongside her husband, and she wrote the book called A Woman in the Polar Night. So the story in this book switches between her own story and Christiane's story. For those who do not know, Svalbard is a Norwegian territory very far north. It's a place where it gets really dark and you often wear a gun in case you meet a polar bear. I can imagine that traveling there in the 1930s will be worth writing a book about. And it's also now a book I'm considering reading. You basically get an insight into Sandberg's head when she's trying to conquer her fear of the dark, while she explains why the lack of darkness is a bad thing. The book reminded me quite a lot of Benjamin Labatut's When We Cease to Understand the World. Even though this is a non-fiction book and Benjamin Labatut's book is sort of a mix, the feeling I got when I read the two books were pretty much the same, even though his book is quite a lot darker, pun intended. One thing Sandberg is very good at is taking her own experiences and connecting them to bigger themes, so she can sit alone in the cabin and talk about her experience there, and suddenly we're talking about black holes, and it feels natural, which is weird. That is one of the strengths of this book, I would say. And she does this at the same time as the book is easily read, has a very easy and understandable language, so I don't think anyone will think of this book as a book that's hard to read. And also it has a lot of poems. Many of them are Jon Fosse's poems, so if you're a Jon Fosse fan, this will be a plus and maybe enhance the reading experience even more. It's a very easily read book, and if you're interested in the theme and don't want to read anything big, this is highly recommended. She doesn't only talk about the darkness itself, but how we humans behave when we get too little or too much darkness. And one interesting thing about the book is that she describes how it's worse in many cases to have too little darkness because we cannot sleep and thus we get insane, which I found very interesting. And that's maybe at the point where I connected this book to Benjamin Labatut's book, because that book is also about people going insane. Also, one thing that people have been talking a lot about lately is the use of cell phones when trying to sleep and the blue light that keeps you awake, etc., etc. There are some practical tips to how you can sleep better and get more darkness into your life. But the biggest thing for me is that she describes on the cover that 2 out of 3 Norwegians live in a place where they can't see the Milky Way. And as I said earlier in this video, experiencing darkness when it's really dark is something special. This also made me reflect on when I grew up, because I grew up in a small place where there wasn't a lot of light pollution. It's a small place where there wasn't a lot of lighting in general, but we also turned off our street lights just to save money, but the side effect is that it got darker and I really missed that. Now I live in Oslo where it's never dark. Never ever. On the front cover it says, "I would like to have moved into this book." And it's written by a book blogger called Synne Fredriksen. And I couldn't agree more, because it feels like the book you want to live in, just because it's dark and cozy and you feel like you can breathe again. So I thought that quote really summed it up for me as far as my reading experience goes. If more non-fiction books had been written in the same way, I think I'd be reading more of them. Not because I don't like non-fiction, it's just so slow reading non-fiction, but this didn't feel like a non-fiction and thus I read faster and it was more enjoyable. So I really enjoyed this book. I do not know if you enjoyed this book as much as I did, if you're not interested in the topic, but for me this was great. It was also written in Norwegian nynorsk, which I absolutely love, so that was a big plus. I think this book will be with me for a long time. It will be in my mind each time I'm near the darkness or I miss the darkness, and that's a good sign. So do recommend for you darkness lovers. Or if you're just interested in the topic. But thank you all for watching this video. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!